he peeled off the first bill in the money clip. I remember correctly, it was President Woodrow Wilson on the front. It was a $100,000 bill. I didn't know there was such a thing. He took that bill, crumpled it up, then brought out his gold, looked like a gold-plated lighter, lit it, and then proceeded to burn the bill. And then he turned it upwards and lit his cigar with it. So he lets the bill burn and then drops it into the metal wastebasket. And then proceeds to puff away, but he went and he brought out another $100,000 bill from his money clip and pointed and showed us all again. He says, "Now this is not for you." And then it proceeded, the next part of his message was, "You do not use these." He brought out and he showed us the other $100,000 bill. His central message was, "This is not for you. You need to do something else." And he brought out in his one suit pocket a handful of gold coins. As he clinked them together, he said, these are what you buy. You do not use these." And he showed us the note payable again, the Federal Reserve note. The recipe he was giving us was you take all your profits after expenses, which would be your net profits. He said, do it quarterly or even monthly if you can.
So basically saying that you should take any profits that you make in fiat and convert it to real money gold. Exactly. That's what he was saying.
He didn't say real money gold. He just said gold. Okay, just those. Yes. So here I am. He burned a $100,000 bill to show that it was worthless. And then he said, you take the profits, and turn them into that. The second part of his message was he had a George Washington $1 bill. And he says, it may not be in my lifetime. It will probably be in your lifetimes. You will see this. Where the $100,000 Woodrow Wilson would not be any different than the $1 bill. And he did say this, it was not him doing it. He said, the people, the men I work for.
I keep hearing these numbers that there are, people above the age of 55, 60, 65, somewhere around there, definitely over 45, don't really have a 401k or an IRA, and the few that do, the small percentage that does, don't even have $100,000 or at the most $100,000 in their retirement account, if you want to call it that, 401k, IRA, whatever. So I got to thinking, questioning, why is that? I mean, I know why, really, because I've been into this very long and stuff, but on its face, it's manipulations of the market, it's Wall Street, it's, government, it's politicians, it's you scratch my back, I scratch your back for corporations and get, if I can get involved with the government and I get this free money coming to me, I got this contract, it's huge. And then people who are in charge of the funds, from the government aspect, they don't care, it's not their money, and they'll just take more, steal more from the people. They'll pass some more legislations, more laws, or not even executive order, just stealing more, that kind of stuff. So it doesn't just on a broad base talk about, I'm not talking about taxes, I'm talking about inflation. I'm talking about the hidden tax inflation, the amount, why your dollar that we still use today is worth so little compared to what it used to. So it got me thinking, it's like, well, if people don't have this much in the 401ks or the IRA, or some people might not even have that, why is that? Well, it's like, obviously they're uneducated and they're miseducated by financial advisors or some team of anyone from some sort of, in their office, their business, their employer, that gets some sort of person coming in and say, hey, we got IRAs 401k is available. Now, this is your go-to people to talk to about your account, and they're gonna, head up the whole 1,000 or 30 or 500 people that are in the company. So I've always said this, and this is just repetition itself, is the assets under management from a financial standpoint, a financial advisor, a house like a Prudential, that kind of stuff. They don't care if the stock goes up or down. They don't care if you get a lot of gains or a lot of losses. Doesn't matter, because they're still making their commission. Their commission, no matter what it does. So it's all about the number, assets under management. All right, so I've been over that. So anyways, I was thinking, well, what if people were educated? I know in the past they were, to the most part, but past I'm talking prior to the 50s, 60s, 1960s, maybe even the 70s, a little bit, but the dumbing down society, indoctrination, started then, just a small creep then, in the government schools, on the television, on the programming, in the press, that kind of stuff. And that's all that people are surrounded with, so that's all that people are gonna know. Unless for some reason they want to think differently, or got a reason to think differently, or that's just the way they are, or forced to think differently. So like, I something's not right here, I gotta figure this out. What everyone's been telling me, or everything I've learned or known, quote unquote, all my life, or for the last 20 years, or last 50 years, has gotta be wrong. Something doesn't, add up. They start looking into it, and then they discover that there's lies, piled upon lies, piled upon lies. And that in itself keeps the people that are in charge, in quotes, your banks, your banksters, your politicians, that kind of stuff, keeps them at the helm. They keeps them at the control switches, at the trigger. And everyone else falls in line because they're sort of dependent, for the most part. Not fully, maybe they are fully, but for the most part, they have some sort of dependency on the government because they've been, I guess, taught that, or they learned that, or they've been forced to learn that. Mistaught, or taught the correct or incorrect way. The incorrect, way it is, the incorrect, I guess, reality of how things really are. So anyways, enough of that. So my thought experiment, my thought process was, what happened? What would happen if people, instead of investing in those 401ks, the IRAs, all these made up things, conglomerate things that Wall Street puts together, the big heads, that kind of stuff, if all the people on Main Street, for the most part, that are involved in that, and right now I think there's over 55% in America involved in the stock market at some level in Wall Street, what happens if they just say, I'm out, no more, I'm not doing 401k, I'm not doing IRA. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invest, if you want to call it that, I'm going to purchase gold and silver monthly, every month, for so many years. And at least that way I have a hard asset, I have a physical asset, and I'm holding it. I have something that nobody else can say, hey, you know what, that has no value because our bank crashed, or because we're having financial problems, we're looking at bankruptcy, we gotta take some away from you. Or because you posted something wrong, we're gonna fine you, so we're gonna take it right off the top. If they don't have access to that stuff, and they don't have it, and you don't depend on them for control of that, that doesn't happen. It's 100% yours, and 100% of your control, 100% of the time. So that's all on you. That's all yours, no matter what. And why gold and silver? Well, gold, that's been the standard for thousands of years. Even today, I believe the last thing was banks the central banks, the big banks, the banks that run the JP Morgan, run the, Chase, run the big establishments, the central banks, the ones that I would dare say have a say in the countries, that sort of run all that. But that's a whole different story to itself. Now, this year, 2003, 2002, last year, have invested and bought the most amount of gold that's ever been on record that they have. Before that, I believe it was, I wish I had this down. I think it was 1967 was when they was to their large amount at that time. I mean, the biggest they had until on paper since 1967. Now they say, ever since record keeping, this is the largest that the central banks have ever purchased and ever invested into gold. 2022, 2023. And then you got to ask yourself, well, why is that? Well, it's not because it's tradition. It's not because it's just a relic. It's not because they just want to waste the money on shiny little metal. No, it's because it has a standard. I mean, the countries, the people, the, agencies you want to call that, or the entities that own the most gold make the rules. Period. That's what it is. Those who have the most wealth, gold, have the control. They run it. I mean, that's it. Hands down. No one's on top of them. No one's telling them what to do. No one's pushing them around. Everyone, on some sense, is answering to them. That's why. Because gold is the standard, and it always has been for thousands and thousands of years. So anyways, so I did that thought experiment, and I went through the painstaking thing of what were people making. I went from 60 all the way up to this year. So I'm like, what were the prices? What were the rates that were at 1960, gold and silver, and then what were wages? What was just the average wage of Americans, whether it was a household or that kind of stuff, was the average wage those years. And then I sort of grouped it in decades. So I got the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 20 to 2020, 2022, basically is the last of the numbers I had. I did a little updated, last week, but anyways, so I'm like, where would someone be if they're like, they never want to deal with this market stuff, never want to deal with the 401ks, the IRAs, never want to touch Wall Street. I'm just buying gold and silver. So it's like, well, how much? I mean, yes, the wages never made enough, never caught up to inflation, even though it made the pain of inflation, made the pain of the theft feel like a little less, and made more acceptable that, well, prices are going up is what people expect. The price of a candy bar, or the price of a vehicle, or the price of this or that is going up because it's inflation. It's the norm. The government says we have to because we're having growing society, a growing population. So that makes sense. And that's the lies that people have been told, and that's the lies that have been instilled in children in government schools and colleges and everything ever since. Television, that kind of stuff. So if you really think about it, that's not what it is. That's not the whole deal. And this is in about that in detail. But I did that, so I just want to give you some numbers and get people thinking. So we have 1960, 1 ounce of gold and 6 ounces of silver each month. All right? That's what they purchased. So you got to figure that out. How much of a percentage is that when they're working in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s? And I worked it around the same rough amount of percentage they'd be spending, but I more or less just stuck with those because of the fluctuation on how much fiat currency it would cost. 1920, the gold to dollar thing was, we're looking at $21.67 an ounce. and that was we were on our a larger gold standard. I mean, I guess a more attached gold standard. So it was 2167 in 1920, and by 1930, it's within there. By 1930, on average, yes, we're talking FDR is coming along, that kind of stuff. But in 1930, gold was $35. So I just wanted to show a few little visuals here. So 1 ounce of gold, 1920 was 2167. Now, in 1930, this ounce of silver, or ounce of gold, $35. So it was this in 1930. $35 right here. I got a 10, a 20, and a 5. $35 for one of these in 1930. All right? So you go to 1940, all the way to 1940, it's still $35 until Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods is 1944, and that's when the whole gamut changed, and they took more wealth, more purchasing power away from society, away from the citizens, if you want to call it that, and revamped and recalculated and refigured, for the most part, the value of gold. It went to a certain amount in the 30s versus it was in the 20s by way of, I guess, just theft, by the way of confiscating people's gold. That was it. So through that, then they did the whole Bretton Woods system and said the U.S. dollar is the standard, that this is as good as gold, la-da-da-da-da, so all the countries fell in line, and they bought this paper and said, okay, it's as good as gold, so this is what we're going by for our commerce around the world. So by 1940, $35, and then I have, in the middle, after Bretton Woods, 1944, in the middle, so at the end of 1940, you got a little more. So the average of 1940s, I figured it was like $38. All right? All this paper, $38 for one of these. All right? That's what it was. So then we got into the 1950s. It was still, on average, $38 for an ounce for this. So we got the 1960s. 1960s, not much really changed. The on average from 1960s was $39 an ounce. So $39. So 39 of this paper, $39 worth this paper for 1 ounce of gold. And then by 1970, I got 1970s. I just lumped 1970s and what happened in 1971, August 15th, 1971. Nixon took us completely off any attachment to gold. Zeroed out. We're 100% fiat currency at that moment. When, we had France coming in and say, we want our gold, that kind of stuff. Nixon closed that window and said, no more. We're not doing this. We kept all the gold for the most part. And then they kept all this fiat paper, which had no backing to it at all. So the average in the 1970s was $250 for one of these. All right, if this is the same one that would cost $21.67 in 1920, and the same one that costed $35 in the 1930s through the late 40s, it was 38, and then 1950s 38, 1960s 39, and then by 1970 this was $250. All right, so we got 1970s, then we got 1980s rolls around. Then we're looking at this here cost 6 of these, 6 $100 bills, 1980s or the 1990s. So it went up like that, 1980s, because of all the Nixon thing, that kind of stuff, and people saying, well, really, they're taking our wealth, and they jumped on board, that kind of stuff. There was some manipulation involved, that kind of deal, and now there was even more, and they got all these extra Wall Street things made, and these ETFs, these traded funds based on metals, that kind of stuff. For the most part, I mean, I'm really broad brushing this, but through there, they were able to get the cost of this down by the 1990s. And it wasn't just that. It was other. It was the economy. It was Japan was really on fire with things, that kind of stuff, as far as selling, and they were just making electronics. So 1990s, this was, we had $370 for an ounce. So, all right, that's fair enough. So by 2000, in the 2000s, 2010, on average, more or less, I just averaged the whole decade, $800 for one of these. So 8 of these for one of these by 2000. Let's say, all right. So then we got by 2010. It was just not 10 years later, whatever. By 2010, $1,400. So 14 of these by 2010. And just fast forward to today. I mean, we're looking at it fluctuates now because of the dollar's value goes up and down because it's so manipulated and has really no backing. People just have some sort of confidence in it for some reason still. But anyways, 1880, 1840, 1820. So 18 of these. And if you want to buy one of these, it's probably going to cost you 20 of these because of the cost through the dealer and that kind of stuff. So one of these, 20 of these. 20 of these, one of these. Now, today, for the most part, give or take. Even though 1920, one of these, this, $21 for the same thing. So in 1920, if you would have had the same gold, the same 1 ounce of gold in 1920 to today, it would have cost this much paper of it. Today, it's going to cost you 20 of these for the same gold, the same 1 ounce that you had in 1920, 1930, 1940, 1960, 1970. Why is that? Because this is money. This holds value. This holds the person who put their blood, sweat, and tears and labor into accumulating what was needed for this. They hold it and save it and preserve it. Unlike the paper that just dwindles away and melts away. I've said this before too. It melts away like an ice cube on a hot summer day. I mean, and now it's a blazing hot day. You bought one of these a month, all right? And then you don't have to do one of those. Really, you could do, this is a 1/10 of an ounce of gold. I mean, you could just, if you're like, wow, there's no way I would have been able to afford this much back then. Well, 1/10 of an ounce then, all right? At times, maybe you got a bonus, you made a little more, or you got a second job, or you changed jobs, and now you can get some of these. But in the meantime, you can only afford 1/10 of an ounce. So it's not like, well, I can't afford an ounce, so I'm out. I don't count me in. It's not like that. There's fractions. And then on top of that, there's silver. So if you bought one ounce of gold, one of these, and 6 of these a month. That's what I'm talking. Where would we be today? Where would we be today? Well, should I go over the silver too? Because, I mean, silver in 1920 was, we got 75 cents for this. 1930, 42 cents. 1940, 55 cents. 1950, 80 cents. 1960, $1.10. 1970s, $3.50. 1980s, $9. 1990s, $5.50. 2000s, $12. Now, roughly $22, plus your markup for the deal or whatever. So this is the same piece of silver that if it's just not the same coin or the same round, but 1 ounce of silver would have cost you 75 cents back in 1920, would have cost you $1.10 in 1960. Today, that same ounce of silver is going to cost $22. That's just because this isn't losing value. This isn't losing value. This is losing the value. This is not losing value. So anyways, sorry if it's drug on long, but I want to show visuals and get people thinking. If there's people involved that have no idea, never done this before, younger people, great. And if I'm not explaining this good enough, go out there and search other sites, Mike Maloney, Doug Casey. There's plenty out there just to dig into. Just give it a go. Anyways, I want to show you some numbers here. So if someone's like, I'm going to do this, and they did it for the last 60 years. I stayed out of Wall Street. I stayed out of that kind of stuff, stocks, bonds, all that mutual funds crap. I just invested my 1 ounce of gold and my 6 ounces of silver every month. So for the last 60 days, or 60 years, excuse me, this gentleman and this lady has been doing this. I'll show you some accumulation. So 1960s, for the 60-year period, if you did it we're in 2023 right now, from 1962 to now, you would have $690,000 in gold. That's the dollar value today. Gold for 60 years, since 1962, would be $690,000. 50 years, 1952 would be 72 would be $407,000. Since 1982 would be $367,000. And then we got silver would be $40,000 for 60 years. $39,000 since 1972, and then since 1982, $38,000. So why are those numbers of silver so much closer? The major manipulation in the gold market and the gold to silver ratio has just gapped so much. It used to be so much tighter than it is today. In the 60s, gold and silver ratio there's 19 ounces of gold. It would cost you to buy 1 ounce of gold. 19 ounces of silver would cost you to buy 1 ounce of gold. That's just how they rated it, the rating. By 1970, to buy 1 ounce of gold, it would cost you 30 ounces of silver. By 1980s, to get 1 ounce of gold, it would cost you 53 ounces of silver. By 1990s, 1 ounce of gold would cost you 59 ounces of silver. And today, 1 ounce of gold roughly is going to cost you 80 ounces of silver. So see that gap, it just gaps. So because of that, the gaps they were so much closer back in the day, back in the 60s, that the cost of silver, you weren't buying much more of it because you're only buying 6 a month versus 6 ounces a month versus 1 ounce of gold a month. And over time, gold has really reaped the benefit of that because the value of the gold has just been addressed and accustomed and is growing versus the value of silver. Even though, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, gold is a legacy building metal. It just always has been. I mean, it's you can take an ounce of gold and go anywhere in the world, and people will accept it. People know what it is. People know it has value, and you can barter with it. You can trade for it. You can do whatever you want with it. Same with silver, but not as easily with silver as you can gold. Try to take a $10 bill, even a $100 bill from the U.S. Yeah, it's still recognizable. People still get it mostly around the world, mostly around different countries, but not all. Not all. That's it. I mean, you go to, just for example, you go to some tribes over by Africa or wherever they are. They could care less about this paper. What are they going to do with this? Really? But this, they know what this is. They know what this is. They're like, whether I can use it right now or not, I know how I can get something for it. Same with this on a certain note. I mean, this is a great bartering thing for people that are, more in their third world countries and more advanced. Anyways, I want to go over those. I went over those numbers. I know I got a little, because I was reading off the wrong line. But if someone says, why I can't do 1 ounce of gold or 6 ounces of silver every month, and I couldn't have, and I don't think anyone can, or most people can't, so what are my options? Well, like I said, instead of buying that ounce of gold, you can buy the 10th ounce of gold, and you can buy a few of them, or you can buy a 1/4 ounce of gold, or a 1/2 ounce of gold. So I just did, if you just want to do half, you're like, well, I could invest half. Well, if someone said, well, since 1960, or 1950, 1970, whatever year we're in talking about, so 1962 to today, 60 years, that would have been last year, what would have happened if I would have only done half? Or I want to do half now, so I want to see what the history would tell me. So if you only did half of that, half of an ounce, that kind of stuff, yeah, you get markups are a little more that kind of stuff, but it's all relative. The numbers would be roughly half. I mean, you would have, if you started this in 1962 to today, doing half of that, doing half an ounce of gold and 3 ounces of silver, you would have $350,000 in today's value in gold. And you would have $20,000 in today's value in silver. And you would have $203,500 in gold if you did from 1970 on, and $19,500 in silver. If you did it from 1980 on to today, you would have $183,500 in gold and $19,000 in silver. This is all after the market manipulations. Gold and silver, I feel, are so undervalued still, and I feel they're trying to keep that. But once this last thing drops, and we are found out this fiat currency debacle, I know they're going to run the CBDCs, and they're pushing that. They say by July it's going to be in operation. I don't know how full it's going to be, or just the start of it, but I know once things start, it's real. It's real right now. It's just in the background. No one knows about it. Barely anybody knows what a CBDC is, central bank digital currency. That's what they have on the docket, and that's what they're doing. So with that, once that's here, my fear is that they'll control what people can buy and would spend on, that kind of stuff. If you can or can't, where you can or can't. But anyways, I've been over that before. So all in all, if you take anything from this, the biggest thing from this is if you've been in a 401k, IRA, mutual funds, all that, you have digits. That's it. You have digits that somebody else controls. Somebody else really has legal authority over. But they're your digits, right? If you would have stayed out of the stock market, stayed out of our 401ks, IRAs, that kind of stuff, you would have real value, real assets, things of real worth. I mean, you could have done more if you had extra to do more, and you're like, you know what, I'm only going to do half of that gold and silver. I'm going to buy half an ounce and 3 ounces of silver a month, and the rest of it I want to buy ammunition, firearms. I want to invest in my whatever I'm working on for my shop or my business, or I want to try to build up my rental capacity or try to get a rental, that kind of stuff, rental house, apartment, whatever it is, townhome. Great. I'm not telling you it's one or the other. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to get this idea in front of you and get you some numbers, some real numbers that I came up with, that I added up, and I went through all the painstaking stuff of what average wages were, what people were making from 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s to today, and then figured out on average the same percentage for the most part. I'm just broad brushing this. People could probably afford to buy 1 ounce of gold and 6 ounces of silver every month if they stayed out of the stock market. They stay away from these mutual funds. They stay out of all this other stuff, away from financial planners and all this other stuff that people say, well, you need to be involved because these guys are the professionals. These guys are the ones that went to school for this, or these guys are the ones that care. You really have no idea because you're ignorant. That's if you start learning anything and start really researching stuff, you more or less rise above them by far. Because most of them, not all, most of them, financial planners and stuff, they just do a little run into it's just a class sort of scenario for the most part, whether it's a 6-month, 4-month, 9-month ordeal, whatever it is, it's close to what it is to get your real estate license. So it's basically all that. And then in the end, not all, but in the end, most, what is on their main docket, he or she, how do I get more money? How do I secure myself? How do I do what's best for me? Yes, maybe I want to help these people get a home or help these people, get more financial security or learn about these other products that we have to sell them on these bonds or these mutual funds. But what's going to be the most beneficial for me? That's really what it is. That's human nature. I'm going over this. I just want to tell people, get it out there. There's not a wrong answer as long as you're looking for answers. And the best way to learn is to fail. I'm not saying go out there and fail, but I'm saying go out there and don't be afraid. I just want to thank you for watching. And if you like this, hit the like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And as always, stay vigilant, protect yourself, your family, your health.